Hello all. In this video, I would like to discuss the topic theoretical difference between structuralism and post-structuralism. What is post-structuralism or what is post in post-structuralism? We know that the prefix post will be added with the meaning after. So post-structuralism literally means after structuralism. When do we have or why do we have an after structuralism, or when do we come out with a new movement when there is already a system? So already there is a movement called structuralism. Then why do people or thinkers come out with an after movement or an updated version of structuralism? Or is it a rebellion against the existing system, or is it a continuation of the previous one? These are some of the questions that comes to our mind when we hear the term post-structuralism. We know that newer and newer things will come into existence when the existing system may not be suitable to the needs of the changing scenarios, or we are in a rebellion with the existing system. So why thinkers come out with a newer version of theory called post-structuralism? Is post-structuralism a rebellion or a continuation of structuralism? That is a very important question that we need to address here. So before moving to that, or in order to understand that, we need to go to the basic tenets of structuralism. Then we will be able to understand why there is a theory after structuralism. So we know that structuralism, one of the very central principles within structuralist criticism is the belief or is the argument that language doesn't just reflect or record the word as we previously thought. Language is not just reflecting or recording the word, rather it shapes it. So that how we see is what we see. This is one of the very central principle within structuralist criticism. Then there is a problem, because when we say that language constitutes our world, or we have access to reality, access to the world only through the linguistic medium, what is the consequence of that belief? The post-structuralist would say that the consequences of this belief are that we enter a universe of radical uncertainty, since we can have no access to any fixed landmark which is beyond linguistic processing, and hence we have no certain standard by which to measure anything. So we need a standard or a fixed reference point, intellectual reference point, in order to understand understand our world. So with the argument that everything is linguistic, or everything is a linguistic construct, or it is constituted by language, then there is a situation that we will not be able to understand the existence of ourselves by checking into an external standard. There is a very simple example in order to prove this point. One is in the beginning theory, Peter Barry says that the example of a train. For example, you imagine that you are in the compartment of a train which is not running at present. It is in the first platform of your compartment of the railway station. Imagine that there is another train in the next platform. Later, after some time, the second train starts moving. Then you will have the sensation that it is your train which is moving. So you will be able to understand that it is not your train which is moving by just looking outside and you see some fixed points there, or fixed platforms and other things there. So we always need some kind of such landmarks in order to validate our own existence. So with the argument that language is the only thing, language constitutes our word, we reach in a situation where all the fixed intellectual reference points are permanently evaded if we take the position taken by the structuralist criticism. And post-structuralist critics says that structuralist thinkers do not have the courage to accept this scenario. So they say that when language constitutes our world, we reach in a kind of a gravity-free world where there is nothing is permanent or nothing is fixed. That is why maybe Derrida very famously proclaimed that there is nothing outside the text, or there is nothing outside the language, outside the linguistic processing. So this is, or we reach in a kind of a decentered universe that is a result of the belief that language constitutes our world. So we cannot know where we are, since all concepts which define the center and hence also the margins have been deconstructed or undermined if we take it into consideration the position taken by the structuralist critics. That is what post-structuralist critics argue. And they say that whenever we talk about language, we always, as a common man as well, even if we don't have to be a big thinker and all, in order to understand the danger of such a scenario or that kind of an anxious situation, because whenever we are in a need to use language for a higher purpose, for example, you are writing a letter to the principal of the college, or you are writing a letter to the bank, you will not be so casually using the language. You will have this fear in you. Everything is correct, or spelling mistakes are correct, or there aren't any grammar mistakes, or all the points have been recorded, everything is okay. You will read again and again and again. So we know that language is not a medium that we can trust completely, or language is not a medium which is completely in our control. There are slippages and spillages. So radical linguistic skepticism is, or an anxiety about language is so natural in our human society. But what post-structuralist critics do is that they intensify this thing, and radical linguistic skepticism became one of the very prominent nature of post-structuralist criticism. So when we talk about the differences between structuralism and post-structuralism, we will be able to put everything into maybe 4 major heads: origin, tone and style, attitude to language, and project, so that we will be able to understand the real nature, where they differ and what are the commonalities and all that. So if you focus on the first point, origin, you know that structuralism originated based on the thinkings of the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. So when we talk about the origin, we are sure that structuralism has its root in linguistics. And what is linguistics? Linguistics is a discipline with a scientific outlook. They believe in method. They collect data, analyze the data, interpret that data, and come to a conclusion. They believe in that kind of a scientific kind of an organization of things. So linguistics is a discipline with that kind of a scientific outlook, and structuralism inherits this scientific outlook, whereas post-structuralism derived from philosophy. And we know that in philosophy we are always skeptical about everything. We will always be suspicious about, we will be always questioning things. There are this famous statement by Nietzsche: there are no facts, only interpretations. There are no facts, only interpretations. And there are another statements like we need to interpret interpretations than interpret things. So this is the way philosophy works. And post-structuralism inherits this skepticism of philosophy and again intensifies that skepticism. That is one major difference between structuralism and post-structuralism. Secondly, tone and style. Structuralist writing, following the previous point, the scientific outlook of linguistics, following that, they believe in, or they follow the abstraction and generalization. They have a detached scientific coolness of tone. For example, if you read or study the works by Roland Barthes in his structuralist phase, for example, Introduction to the Structural Analysis of Narrative, you will be able to see that he is following a very scientific kind of writing in it. The style of writing is scientific. The tone of writing is scientific. That is the speciality of structuralist writing. Whereas, if you take post-structuralist writing, they are emotive. Their language is emotive. The tone is urgent and euphoric, characterized by extreme, kind of a celebratory kind of mood. The style is flamboyant and self-consciously showy. The titles may contain puns and allusions. This is one nature of post-structuralist writing. The third is, what is their attitude to language, which we have already as mentioned. Following that, structuralists argue that language constitutes our world, and everything is entered. They believe that there is a linguistic system, or language constitutes our world. They say simply with that. What is the outcome of that? For them, language is a very orderly system. There is no confusion. But whereas post-structuralism, when they say that, or when they take this view, they are not seeing this so innocently. Because when language constitutes our world, when we say that language constitutes our world, then the outcome is that the reality itself is textual. We are all tissues of textualities. Everything is textual. There is nothing outside the language. So when we talk about language as we have already said, language is characterized by slippage and spillage. We cannot always focus or confidently use the language. Now, when we speak anything, we mean something, and the listener may be getting something else. Not because of our fault, because of the characteristic features within the language make it impossible to completely grasp the meaning. Meaning change. Whatever we mean may not be what the listener gets. So post-structuralist critics would use some kind of an agricultural kind of originated terms like dissemination, like seeds are disseminated or scattered around. It can also have some sexual connotation as well. Just like seeds are scattered in the ground, the meanings are like that. We cannot for sure say that where it is, what it actually means. So that is the attitude to language for post-structuralist critics. And the last point is project. By project, it means what is the fundamental aim of each movement. What is the fundamental aim of structuralist criticism? What is the fundamental aim of post-structuralist criticism? Structuralism questions our way of structuring and categorizing reality and prompts us to break free of habitual modes of perception and categorization. But we can thus have a reliable view of things according to them. For example, how Claude Lévi-Strauss and all that, they focus upon the binary opposites and all that, then analyze things like that. So they focus upon that kind of a categorizing and all that, which again shatters our commonsensical view of things. For post-structuralism, they distrust the very notion of reason. The notion of the dissolved or constructed subject individually is just a tissue of textuality. Everything is linguistically premeditated. So that is the focus of post-structuralist criticism. So these are some of the differences between structuralism and post-structuralism. For further reference, you can make use of Peter Barry's beginning theory as an introduction, and then if you want, you can read further into the topics like a dissemination, what is a dissemination, things like that. I hope these are clear. Thank you.